Here on the farm, we've literally been in a bubble, all summer. And our stewards and our presidents, all of our staff, boy, everybody is just, we're happy, we're healthy. Look, the cows don't know that anything's going on. The chickens don't know anything is going on. The trees don't know. The tomatoes don't know. And so it's not in our face every day, and we just go about our business, and we're just in this bubble. But boy, when we go to the city or our delivery vehicle, we deliver into the city, and the abject fear in the eyes of these urban customers is palpable, and we don't see anything like that in the countryside. It just doesn't exist. The average city in America has 3 days worth of food. In other words, if you suddenly dropped an iron curtain around the city limits of any city in the U.S., it only has 3 days' supply of food in it. We're seeing dryness accelerating in dry areas and wetness accelerating in temperate areas. So with that in mind, I encourage people, if you're footloose and fancy-free, if you can go anywhere, don't go to a dry area. Go to a temperate area.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance and Reluctant Preppers. We have a returning guest we haven't had on for some time. Joel Salatin is the co-founder of Polyface Farms in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. He's a teacher, an advocate for honest food, food integrity, empowering people to provide for themselves, author of numerous publications, and all-around educator and speaker. Joel, thanks for joining us again this time on Liberty and Finance.
Thank you, Dunnigan. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
In anticipation of your arrival, we've received a lot of suggestions for questions from our viewers, and several of them have to do with such things as, what are we heading into? Is it going to be a grand solar minimum, or are we heading into climate change in the other direction where it's heating up? And we want to get to that in a little bit, but first we've just got to look at the environment in terms of the political and social and liberty environment that we've been kind of through the blender here this year in 2020. Could you talk to us about the impacts that you're observing? You interact with so many different people, all the way from your mail order business to local regional customers and stores and farmers markets and teaching groups that come to your farm and student interns and everything, and your speaking group engagements. You interact with so many different types of venues of people. What are the main takeaways that you're having this year from all the strange factors that we've all been through together?
Well, that's a pretty comprehensive question. I guess if we were going to make a list, and I'm not sure that this is in order, but it's just in the order that things are popping into my head. One is certainly urban flight. I think people are very aware that if and when the wheels fall off, and just so you know, somebody asked me lately, a group that was getting ready to invest in a property, they asked me, what does wheels fall off mean to you? And I thought about it a little bit, and I said, if I can't get grain, and I can't get fuel, and I can't get electricity, I would call that wheels falling off, because those three things drive everything. And obviously, I'm thinking a little bit of our own farm business. We feel like we're pretty resilient. I mean, we don't buy fertilizer, we don't buy chemical pesticides, herbicides. We have 8 miles of gravity-fed water, so we don't need any power for that. But we still buy grain for the chickens and pigs. And it takes fuel to get it here, and to disperse it, and it takes power to run the scalder and run the computers and things that we use, and so we if money stops, we can figure out a different way to have mediums of exchange, even if it's barter. But anyway, as I think about that, my and that's strictly a layman's thought. Firewood. I mean, we heat with wood. Well, that's great, but what if we can't run the chainsaw because you can't get gas? So for me, it's fuel, electricity, and grain. If those three go, then we're into an apocalyptic situation. So anyway, that's just here on our place. If that's what I'm thinking about, just multiply it by 100-fold, and that's what it's like in the city to not be able to acquire those things. So anyway, urban flight is a huge one, which means that we're for sure every single house outside the city that goes up for sale is literally grabbed up at above asking rate by within hours of posting. So we're seeing, I'm just going to call it non-urban real estate is skyrocketing in value and in desire, which brings us to the third thing, which is self-reliance. So the way I explain this to people is if things go crazy, you want to surround yourself in a community with people with an eclectic skill talent set that includes somebody who can build things, grow things, and repair things. Build things, grow things, and repair things. So I expect, and what I'm seeing, is people are starting to take their cash, which we don't know how long cash will last, or if its value will last, or if we'll have hyperinflation with funny money or whatever. We don't know all those things right now, but there is a huge desire to invest in skill, in knowledge, and I don't mean knowledge like computer knowledge. I mean knowledge like how to grow a tomato plant, how to can venison, how to how to tan leather. Okay, that kind of herbology, how to get all your cures through herbs you can grow in your backyard or a little pot garden, as opposed to pills from the pharmacy. And the third thing is relationships. So skill, information, and relationships. If we can convert our today's dollars into those three things, those are non-denominated values that nobody can foreclose on your knowledge, and nobody can repossess your skill. And I think that as we look at physical value, a lot of people are beginning to realize that real value is not physical stuff. It's what we know, what we can do, and the people that we associate with.
Those are some big issues. Now, we have one of our sons is moving out of California, specifically Los Angeles County, for Arizona, and their realtor told him that 90,000 people per year are leaving Los Angeles County for Arizona, just for example, but a lot of other people going other places. We've heard of flight out of New York City and others. And that phenomenon that you mentioned of inflation of real estate prices in non-urban areas is really hitting big this year. My wife and I have been searching this year for a homestead location, and actually our search got cramped by the lockdown. We couldn't travel places we wanted to do searching, and when we returned from the one place we were able to go to, I had to cancel and reschedule medical procedures and that sort of thing because they said, "Oh no, you've traveled, you can't come in." It's like, oh dang.
Yes, and for sure. I mean, I didn't mention it, but if we wanted one more bullet point going forward, I think I think the I don't know what the right word or phrase is, but just the heavy burden of dealing with fear. Here on the farm, we've literally been in a bubble. I mean, all summer, and our stewards and our presidents, all of our staff, boy, everybody is just, we're happy, we're healthy. Look, the cows don't know that anything's going on. The chickens don't know anything is going on. The trees don't know. The tomatoes don't know. And so it's not in our face every day, and we just go about our business, and we're just in this bubble. But boy, when we go to the city or our delivery vehicle, we deliver into the city, and the abject fear in the eyes of these urban customers is palpable, and we don't see anything like that in the countryside. It just doesn't exist. And interestingly, we've gone on. We canceled our very first 2 lunatic tours. These are tours we limit to 100 adults and all the children that go with them, and we put everybody on 4 hay wagons, and we do a 2-hour lunatic tour around the farm. Of course, I'm the lunatic, and we canceled the first 2 there in April, I guess it was, and then our first scheduled one in June. We kind of hem-hawed and wondered, and we said, you know what, we're just going to go on with it. We're just going to go on with it. And we did, and they have been full and packed and running over all season. And we're very upfront with people. We say, look, we're not distancing, we're not wearing masks because we're on hay wagons. You can't put 10 people on a hay wagon if everybody's apart. And people come, they hug, you can just feel. You can feel the emotional elation of doing something that seems human, and the dehumanizing idea. I mean, my father-in-law right now is in a therapy, and it's not the hospital; it's the next step down from the hospital. He went in with some problems, and they put him in his convalescent center, and we can't see him. His children can't see him. His wife can't even see him. So all around this convalescent center, the people, family members, are outside talking through windows to their loved ones, spouses, parents, inside. It's insane. There's no accountability. There's no advocate. You go in the hospital. There's no advocate, no accountability. It's the most dehumanizing thing, and so the repression then that comes with this. And my phrase, I just flew to Louisiana, did a workshop here over the weekend, came home, and so I was through the airports, and everything, and the word that I've used is you just feel judgment. People are judging you. Are you sick? And people are judging. I'm judging people that are wearing face masks. Oh, you poor duplicitous people! Don't you read the science? Why are you letting yourselves be ramrodded this way? Of course, the airline shames everybody into. If you care, you'll wear your mask and stay social distancing and all this stuff. I mean, it's just this whole, we're being trained not to intervene with each other and help each other, but that every single person out there is a threat. Yeah, and that's a horrible place for a culture to be. And I mean, we're seeing suicides go up, domestic violence is going up. I mean, it's an incredible thing, and that's all a completely separate issue than the whole, violence that's going on in our urban centers.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a fairly accurate summation. It's frankly refreshing to hear it from you because of your perspective of being connected to the land, connected to natural processes, growth and animal husbandry and farming, and that I don't get that kind of interaction as often, because even though we live outside a small town in a suburban area, I would say that I get exposed more to this city or urban mentality and interactions than what you described. And so it's very it's like a reminder. It's like being awakened from a trance you've been put into to hear those natural, more commonsensical impressions that you're sharing. I really appreciate that. I'm sure our listeners do as well.
Yeah, it's actually quite therapeutic, I think. Yeah. And we've got customers that just come out with their kids just to walk in the fields, to take their shoes off and walk barefoot. And yes, I think it's extremely therapeutic in a time when everything just seems apocalyptic. To, the sun still comes up in the morning, the leaves still grow, the grass still grows, the earthworms still make castings. I mean, there's actually a lot of emotional and spiritual salve, if you will, from that that continuity, and that anchoring to our ecological umbilical, which has survived, all sorts of things throughout history.
Yeah, the predictability and the stability of those of cycles of nature. Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's fascinating. Now, you mentioned that you have your student interns are there as well. Is that proceeding? Are you able to still do that?
Oh my goodness, yes. And in fact, well, we didn't ask permission. And frankly, when we've posted, for example, when we process chickens or whatever, or do things, where we're a bunch of us together making hay or whatever, we post pictures of working on the farm, and we've had some pushback from, well, you're not social distancing, and we're outside, we've just lost our mind here as a culture, I think, and the numbers are actually bearing it out. I mean, the numbers are following a relative, flu kind of trajectory, and the numbers are all dropping like a rock now, and
right. The deaths count, even though there's reason to believe that it may not have been accurate all along, attributed to the COVID, have continued to drop even in those areas and states where the counted cases, which are also debated as far as false positive tests, et cetera, have so-called spiked. The treatments have improved, and the fatalities are just continuing to drop like a rock, and yet it almost seems as though there's a tendency on the part of officialdom to want to keep drumming up the anxiety level rather than moving on to the next step and saying, what are some lessons learned and what can we move on to?
Yeah. More and more people. I mean, when I checked in at the airport last week, there were several attendants standing there at the desk. It was not busy, and of course I put my mask on because I'm a good little boy. There are times when you want to fight and times when you don't, and so I just I have played with the TSA some with the face mask thing, and they say take your mask down so I can identify you. You got your driver's license standing there, and I said, well, CDC says I'm not supposed to touch my face. How can I touch my face and take my face mask down? They kind of look at you, and I say, now who am I supposed to believe, CDC or you? And they got to get this deer in the headlights look, I don't know, and. They said, well, you want hand sanitizer? Oh, no, chemicals, no.
Oh, man.
So, meanwhile, the line.
You're a brave man messing with the TSA, man.
I've done it a couple of times, and it's been fun. They had to call a supervisor in and everything else, but here they are. They take your plastic license ID into their hands.
From your hand to theirs. Yep.
Yeah, they've just touched 20 people ahead of you, and they take yours, hold it up. They want you to take your mask down, so you now put your hands to your face, pull it down, and then they hand you back your license. You take it back in your fingers,
which is now touching 20 last people's germs.
The 20 last people that went through. Yeah, I mean it's nothing about this makes sense. And the problem is there's no control doing it otherwise. I wish there was an airline, one, that would say, you know what, we think this is a farce, and we need each other's we need each other's whatever peanuts dust cloud to keep our immune systems up. So we're not going to do anything, and come on and fly. No mask, no nothing. No, we're going to use good air purifier systems in the plane, but just come on and enjoy your flight. I believe they would be successful. I don't know, but it runs every gamut. I mean, we had people at one of our food drops a week or so ago. Our delivery driver Grace came back with a story. She said, two of our people, two women, literally got into fisticuffs. I mean, they were coming to blows over, one got too close and one said this is a joke, and people are they're just on edge.
Yeah, that's
true. Everybody's fuse is short.
Yeah,
and
stress, chronic
you're
stress.
Exactly right.
Yep, and you don't want to hold it against the individuals either, because everyone you have to assume benign intent and assume that everyone is trying to do their best and they are genuinely concerned, and they've been psychologically traumatized, emotionally traumatized by the barrage that 7x24 on the news for the past 6 months, just constantly making it sound like this is the worst thing that's ever happened in the world. And so that level of anxiety, when you just have chronic anxiety over periods of time, people understandably are going to be short on the fuse.
Yeah, well, I think a lot's going to change after the election.
Why so?
Well, I think as you said, it seems almost like there's a certain satisfaction in keeping things stirred up.
Right.
And I think that I'm not trying to make a big a political statement here, but I think the hatred in the country of Trump, and of course among the media especially, is so profound that the mouthpieces of the culture that run the mainstream media are desperate to keep the narrative agitated, so that because when people are unhappy, they tend to vote out incumbents.
Well, I don't know. Last time, even after the election, it didn't ramp down. It ramped up, if anything. So I hope you're right. I hope you're right that we have. My wife and I pray for that every single day, is that we have fair and free and honest and civilly managed and civilly accepted elections. But I guess we'll see how that plays out.
I'm just saying that if Trump is gone, then there'll be no reason to continue the pandemic narrative, because we don't have to keep everybody disturbed anymore.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Of course, then the question is, but then will it be used for aggressive government, additional government controls, mandates?
Right.
Blah, blah, blah.
Suddenly contact tracing is part of your daily life or whatever, yeah. So could we turn our attention to the next topic? The next major topic here is about a potential for a coming food crisis or food shortage. We've spoken with you about that in the past because, in fact, one of our recent interviews with you was called Food Crisis, Not If You Do This, and talked about people basically getting more self-reliant and producing their own food, getting to know their neighbors and sharing food with their neighbors, and getting to know their local integrity food producers in their neighborhood, know your farmer, and getting close to that. What are you seeing develop? Because we've been hearing that these supply chain disruptions and meatpacking plant closures and on and on and on related to the pandemic lockdown response, and also some of the transportation issues, and just that there's going to be just this big unexpected shortage of meats and all kinds of food that people are used to coming from far away that just ain't going to be coming this next season. Are you anticipating that?
I'm not anticipating shortage. I'm anticipating pretty substantial price increases, because the cost of meeting the cost of what's the word? The cost of
compliance,
reducing the fear factor. The cost of reducing fear is so high that it slows down and, of course, makes less efficient all of these quote-unquote efficient facilities. You have to realize that about the only place in America right now where thousands of people congregate shoulder to shoulder every day in cold, dark, damp environments is in these mega processing facilities. I mean, the country only has, about 150 of these mega processing facilities to do our meat. This includes canneries, where they can, tomatoes and things like that. And the centralization and amalgamation in the processing field, both plant and animal processing, in the last 50 years, has been profound. I mean, at the turn of the century, back in 1900, there were 7 or 8 meat packers that controlled 50% of America's meat supply, and Teddy Roosevelt said it was a monopoly. That's 7 companies controlling 50%. Today, we have 4 controlling 85%,
wow.
and that's considered free market.
Mm.
So what has happened is this massive centralization, and so while it appears to be efficient, as long as fuel is cheap and as long as there's no health fear, it seems to be cheap. But as soon as you have a bobble in transportation, in health, in any of these areas, as soon as there's a bobble, all of that efficiency turns into fragility. And what you realize is that the old decentralized, community-based slaughterhouses, canneries, and things. I mean, our county used to have 10 community slaughterhouses. We had 10 little canneries around. These were little buildings where you could go, and they had special equipment to, can green beans and do, so you could do it in volume and do it rapidly. Communities had these all over the place. They're all gone, and so from a food security standpoint, this amalgamation and centralization does not bode well in times of disruption.
Yeah, there's a lot of assumptions, and I guess that's maybe emblematic of what you were talking about cities. Why urban dwellers have fear in their eyes is because, again, cities are something they're amazing. They're a marvel of modernity when things are going well.
Yes.
And any disruption in transportation or electrical supply or water supply or garbage hauling or health, infection or whatever, suddenly can bring them to a screeching halt, and suddenly you've got people wondering how are they going to get their next meal.
Yes. The average city, I'm told right now, the average city in America has 3 days worth of food. In other words, if you suddenly dropped an iron curtain around the city limits of any city in the U.S., it only has 3 days supply of food in it. Now, if you go back 100 years and you did the same thing, it would probably be a month, because people had larders, they had large pantries, they had gardens, and there was a lot of edible landscaping. Yard apple trees, yard pear trees, a grapevine, and people preserved, packed, stowed this food in a larder, and so the food was not in a Costco warehouse. It was actually in individual domiciles. Throughout, that's where the food was, and so this is a major change. I mean, we're practicing just-in-time inventory management. I mean, that's been the business byword now for 40 years.
Yep.
Just ever since the internet is just-in-time inventorying, and again, as you said, that works great. When there's no disturbance, but as soon as there's a disturbance, just-in-time, and that's what, of course, caught the industry. When the pandemic came in and everybody closed down, it was not that there was a food. That's why I don't think there's going to be a food shortage. I think it's going to be a pricing, because we didn't actually have a food shortage when the supermarket shelves went empty back in April, and the meat counters went empty. There was not a shortage of food. There was a glitch in the food
processing chain. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because there are two completely different markets in the food chain. One is retail, like for homeowners, and the other one is for institutional or wholesale. Believe me, your local university does not buy Cheerios in little 1 pound boxes off the store shelf. It gets Cheerios in great big 50-pound bags, in boxes stacked on a forklift, and so there was plenty of food. It was a packaging and processing issue to divert from the restaurant industry into the retail home industry. We actually, just to give you a very, very personal example here on our farm, so when the store shelves went empty, people started coming out here mobbing us. We went through our retail inventory in no time, and we didn't. And of course, the retail homeowner buys 1 pound packages of ground beef. Let's take a real generic item, ground beef. We sell it to them in 1 pound packages. We make 5 pound packages for our restaurant accounts that are making, meatloaf and burgers and stuff in-house in restaurants. Well, here people came in. We didn't have 1 pound packages. Oh, you're out of ground beef. Well, we had 3,000 pounds of 5 pound packages. Mm-hmm. But so it wasn't a food shortage. It was an inventory glitch made by an anomaly within the system, and that anomaly can be, any number of things, and so I actually don't think there will be food shortages, at least not anytime soon. Eventually we're going to have soil shortages, but that's another topic. I don't think the food shortages will be anytime real soon, but I do think that we'll have food. We already have, of course, a great shortage of food density, of food nutrition, and that's our big problem. We have food, but it's not nutritious because we've depleted our soils. We don't have the fertility, and much of our food, is grown with chemicals that greatly reduce the amount of nutrient density in food. So you have bushels, but you don't have vitality.
Right. And then now you also mentioned, I guess it's how this plays out at the family scale is you may have, they say, the old saying that all politics are local. Okay, so all food shortages, I'll say, are local in this sense that if your family doesn't have food inside the house to eat that day, that's a food shortage.
Right.
There may be 55-gallon drums or bushels bags or whatever down at the distribution center for warehouse for restaurants that are closed, but if you don't have it in your pantry, you have a food shortage as a family. So we've talked about people stocking up on non-perishable foods in addition to growing their own, that sort of thing. That's another thing people get judged and shamed about, as being thought of as a hoarder, as though to have accumulated a supply that will see your family through glitches, so to speak, of any kind, is to deprive others of their needs, and that's unfair, unjust, immoral, evil, antisocial, anti-patriotic, or whatever. How do you get unhooked from that psychological arrow of being a hoarder rather than just making proactive accumulation of some non-perishable things that your family might need in the future?
Well, there's a good Proverbs in Solomon's wisdom. Look to the ant, thou sluggard. It prepares for the off season. Even the ant prepares for the off season, and so part of responsibility, I would suggest. We you could say, well, a 401k plan's hoarding money. You know, it ought to be given to the poor. I mean, you can make this argument for anything, any kind of savings, or future preparation, kind of thing. And so we definitely believe in food savings accounts, money savings accounts, health savings accounts. I mean, savings accounts are not hoarding. Savings accounts are simply being wise about preparing for downturns, because there will always be downturns. So how do you build resilience? If we look at how do we build resilience into our lives, it quickly moves us toward savings accounts and stashing some food, stashing some ammunition, stashing some warm clothes,
right.
A water supply, a cistern, just basic. And what's funny about this, we talk about this, and the things I'm describing here are not earth-shattering, but it's amazing how few people actually do them.
That's true.
The difference between average and above average, you don't have to do very much to be above average. Just imagine if you keep, if you had a cistern. I'm a huge believer in cisterns. They're not that expensive. We've got a 15,000 gallon cistern at our apprentice housing. Comes off the roof. The roof comes off, and the water goes in. But at your home, if you had even a 4,000 gallon cistern, let's say, in your yard, buried in your yard, think of the difference that would make if suddenly there were some disruption, either from pathogens, toxins, or quantity of water. What a difference that would be compared to your neighbors just having water. I mean, you can go a while without eating. I mean, you can actually go, days, most of us, without eating. But you can't go days without water. And so think of what a different state of affairs you'd be in if there were some, major disruption. If you had 4,000 gallons of water stored in your backyard.
Yeah, you're reminding me just of many things. One is I had a good working associate who said his accountant told him never confuse cash flow with cash, meaning that what you're saying about water would be true as well. Never confuse the fact that you are accustomed to having access to a place where you can get a flow of water when you need some to having some. In other words, do you have a store? Do you have a accumulation of a resource, an asset that you can draw on, or are you dependent on someone providing you with a incremental, just-in-time flow of some when you need it, and what happens when it's not there? Another thing made you think about when you said savings accounts, food savings accounts, money savings accounts. We had Dr. Jane Nielsen on talking about don't poison your family with your survival food. So we talked about some of the survival food that people store up is not healthy at all for people. It's not healthful. And you mentioned that, but things need to be nutrient dense. They need to be non-perishable, that sort of thing. They need to have natural versus a bunch of artificial ingredients and preservatives and things. But the same thing true for your savings account is if you're storing up U.S. dollars at this point in time, I would call those a perishable asset. So you want to really question what you've got in your savings accounts too. Is it as good as gold or not? Wow, so many different things. One of the things that's a question that people were puzzled by as part of this whole lockdown was the lockdown on the sale of seeds. People weren't able to put in gardens in many areas. In Michigan was one where the governor made the rule that it deemed as non-essential businesses was the part of the hardware stores or the building supply centers where they sold seeds for planting. Do you have any insight for us on people being able to, the ability in the future for people to be able to continually access seeds and livestock for purchase so they can grow them themselves?
Yeah, well, the answer is your network. And I had a very interesting conversation a month or so ago with a couple of retiring military fellows and their wives. Of course, these are young guys. They're retiring at 20 years, and they're 40 years old. But they were, they'd been in the military for 20 years, and they actually thought things were going to turn south pretty dramatically. So we had this kind of far-ranging conversation about survival, just the basic concept of survival, and we kind of made two threads. One, you can survive by being a hermit mountain man in Idaho, living in a cave and making traps out of sinew and all that. Or the other basic way to survive is in community. You've got people around you that can build and grow and fix, and you kind of huddle together in a enclave of eclectic skill, and you hang through it. Most people, if you ask them which would you prefer, would prefer the communal one, not the hermit one.
Right.
Most of us would like to go through a crisis holding hands with somebody, not just with ourselves. But the problem is that both of these require preparation time. You can't turn them on a dime. You can't learn wilderness skills in a day, and you can't develop an agrarian bunker relationships in a day. I'm answering the question, believe it or not. So the seed question is all about, have we created a network, a community of resilience in our seeds? And so there are seed saver clubs all over the place, and so here on our farm we have some heirloom varieties, especially a tomato that came through Teresa's, my wife's family, from like 150 years ago, and every year she religiously saves those seeds. We plant some more of those tomatoes, and they are the most amazing tomatoes. They're 1 pound tomatoes with no core. They're just an amazing succulent.
I have not heard of such a thing of a heritage hand-me-down within a family of some particular foodstuff. That is amazing.
Yeah. So we keep that, and we have a pear tree that we had a friend graft onto some rootstock that was from her grandmother's wonderful pear tree in her yard, and so we grafted about 5 of them on. The point is that there are people all around that are saving, pure open pollinated, not hybrid, but seeds, and so you need to start now, cultivating some friendships. These folks get together. They do seed exchanges every spring. Many of them are regional. But start a group in your area. Get together with some neighbors and say, hey, let's save some seeds together. Who wants to save 3 varieties of tomato seeds? Who wants to save a couple of kernels of corn? And you may not get 100 varieties, but the basic things, the basic tomatoes and peppers and corn and squash and pumpkin and things, you can save those pretty easily. And so I'm a big believer in cultivating those kinds of relationships now, so that if and when things go nutso, Now the seed thing this spring, and that's interesting that you said it was declared those were just those kinds of stores apparently were declared non-essential. But I can tell you that this spring the seed companies actually just were inundated and sold out of their seed stocks, not because they were non-essential businesses, but because there was such a run on them with people planting backyard gardens that they just ran out of inventory. We don't sell seeds, we sell chickens, and we always sell a handful of backyard flock pullets, ready to lay pullets for people that want 2 or 3 in their backyard. This spring, we sold a bunch from people that, man, I'm getting some backyard chickens because at least they could have eggs, And so there was this just massive influx of interest in growing some garden. People, the United States put in more gardens this year more increase of gardens this year compared to last year than we did in World War II with the Victory Garden campaign.
Wow.
That's pretty dramatic.
Good outcome. Speaking of, I guess, a silver lining to a cloud or fruits from a bitter time, that's great to hear.
Yeah, it is. It's a wonderful silver lining.
Can we talk for a few minutes about this dilemma and this confusion that people are having around which way is the climate going? Because it's affecting, you mentioned this urban flight. Okay, so people are fleeing the urban areas because they recognize the undeniable fact that there's astronomical levels of vulnerability and risk and dependency and the just-in-time subject that they have there. But if they get out, they want to know where they should go to. And there's quite a range of possibilities, but some of those places are up in the mountains and some are up north and some are down where it's typically warmer, tropical, whatever. People are wondering, is there one right answer to that? And we had you on a few months back talking about fire or ice, raising food, feeding your family despite global climate change. And would like to know your latest thinking. You can enlighten us if you formed a more one-sided opinion about the science and what you expect to have happen in the next decade or 2 or 3 or 4. But we'd also like to hear, regardless of which way the climate goes, if it's going to change, what people should do so that they're less fragile about that.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't move to the beach right now.
At least not down in the southeast of the U.S.
Right. Well, I'm just talking about, rising ocean levels. I mean, wow, if you've seen the news in the last 24 hours, this great big shelf of glacier broke off of Greenland, and now there's this big Antarctic shelf starting to break off, and they're literally, enough to raise ocean levels a little bit. So anyway, bad joke. I'd stay away from the beach.
Okay.
In general, what's happening with climate change, from what I can see, and I subscribe not to the greenhouse gas emission theory, but to the water theory. Actually, GHGs only have a effect of about 5% of planetary cooling. 95% of planetary cooling comes with water condensation.
GHG, greenhouse gases? Okay.
Yeah, greenhouse gases, GHGs, only 5%, but 95% is water condensation, the amount of calories it takes to condense water into clouds. That is the Earth's radiator. Well, what's happening as desertification goes across Africa, Australia, what's happened is we have massively changed the amount of vegetation on the planet's surface. A lot of this, of course, is overgrazing, improper grazing. It's not the animals; it's the improper grazing, and then, of course, a lot of row cropping, where there's a lot of bare soil, growing annuals instead of allowing perennials to be grown there. So you get these combinations, and suddenly you start having a lot less bacteria exuding into the atmosphere. Water has to condense around a particle. Most of it condenses around bacteria that exudes from leaves. Some of it can condense around some, ice crystals and things. That's the whole idea of cloud seeding and all that. And that does work, but it's extremely expensive. It's a lot cheaper to let the wafting bacterial exudates of vegetation go into the atmosphere and provide these microscopic particles for water to condense on to make clouds. So what happens is, as you start taking the vegetation off of larger areas, it means that the pressure to condense is even greater on vegetated areas, and that's why we're seeing dryness accelerating in dry areas and wetness accelerating in temperate areas. So with that in mind, I encourage people, if you're footloose and fancy-free, if you can go anywhere, don't go to a dry area. Go to a temperate area, something with at least 30 inches of rainfall, some where there's water, because if the current trends continue, and you can just look at these trend lines. I mean, this isn't manipulated or political. This is just trend lines. If you look at the trend lines, the drier areas. I mean, I was in Spain not long ago, and Spain is scared to death that the North African desert is going to jump the Mediterranean, and if it does, if those patterns hit southern Spain, they're gonna march right up through Europe. And
let me understand.
So,
I really want to understand this. You're saying that because of these processes that you're describing, desertification is like I don't know if it's a biological / physical process, but it can actually spread a desert, not just because you intentionally cut down the trees that used to be there, and so that's why the desert grew, because you cut down the trees, but because there's other more subtle processes that happen around deserts that can cause them to spread.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, a study was done by the University of Wisconsin Meteorology Department actually a couple decades ago. They wrote a book about it called Climates of Hunger, I think it was. And it was done in India, where they just went into a desert, the Rajputana Desert there, and they just fenced out a few square miles. They just fenced it out and just walked away from it. And within 2 or 3 years, vegetation was growing and rainfall increased, like threefold in that whatever, 10 to 15 square mile area, simply from fencing the nomads out with their goats and their sheep that were constantly nibbling every little piece of vegetation. Vegetation was able to grow a little bit longer, a little bit taller, a little more leaf area, cooled things down a little bit, which reduced the reflection of the heat up into the atmosphere, allowed the clouds to form, and you got some rain. I mean, I have seen some stuff in the Middle East, in the desert areas of around like Saudi Arabia, where permaculturalists have gone in and put in simple swales to reduce the runoff and trap a little bit of water. And I mean, in 5 years, it looks like an oasis, and it completely changes. So the point is that a lot of this whole precipitation, rain, hydrologic cycle is extremely localized. It's extremely localized. But as a planet, the planet needs balance. So the planet is going to, just like a physics experiment, equal and opposite reactions, the planet is going to seek its balance. It's going to seek its cooling. So if it can't get it in the Sahara, it's going to get it at the Amazon, or it's going to get it in Georgia or Florida. And so what happens is that these well, I like to call it the radiator. It's the radiator of the Earth, and if a couple of things are, couple tubes are plugged, unlike your radiator, a radiator can't make more tubes, But what nature does is it compensates by creating a couple extra tubes somewhere else. And those extra tubes are in, like America's Midwest. They're in our area. I mean, we're just seeing a wet cycle here over the last several years. It's just unprecedented. This summer we had 6 straight weeks in July and August, which are very dry months for us. 6 straight weeks of 3 inches of rain per week.
Wow!
We've never seen anything like that, and that is happening. That is happening more rapidly. So to me, the precipitation theory of planetary temperature balance actually makes more sense as to why we're seeing simultaneously increasing wetness over here and increasing dryness over here.
Right.
The probably one of the foremost proponents of this theory is a guy named Walter Jenney from Australia. Jehne, I think is his name, and he's, of course, he talks cool because he's from Australia, but he's just a fascinating scientist, and makes a lot of sense to me, and it helps to understand the anomalies. But so with that in mind, you don't want to go to a place that's drying out. You may not want to go to a place that's swamping out, but anything in between is going to be. So in the U.S., that means if you take a U.S. map, what you're looking at. Oh, I'm going to pull my map here. This is a very, very practical question. So in the map, you're looking at, Kansas, Nebraska, Arkansas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Missouri, Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio, Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina.
As potential target areas that would be in that middle range, not too dry, not too swampy.
Would be in the middle range. In other words,
gotcha.
They're gonna tend. And I know we've just had tremendous flooding out in the Midwest. I understand that, but in general, these are going to be areas between those climatic extremes. In general,
got it.
I mean, you can never isolate yourself from climatic anomalies. I mean, they just are. There's no place that's 100% protected anywhere. But that kind of middle America from Colorado east is going to be in that Goldilocks spectrum, not too hot, not too cold, not too wet, not too dry.
Got it. I'm going to quick reintroduce that question because I forgot to give credit to the guy who asked it. 49Fine asks, "Hi Joel, what's your view with respect to the supposed solar minimum or even grand solar minimum that many claim is imminent? Was our shortages that we received this year as part of COVID just Act 1? I'll skip the last part. Okay, so then we'll jump into that. And now I've got to wrap us because I'm going to get it. Somebody else is going to call me shortly here. So we're going to have to come back because there's so many more questions we didn't get to. But this was very, very enlightening. Well, Joel, our time is short and we've got to wrap it up. This has been just fascinating as always. Clearly, we don't talk often enough, and this has been a very eventful year that's really exposed a lot of topics of importance and interest, and has really gotten a lot of people moving and thinking and adjusting. Planting gardens, right? So we'd just love to have you back on again. If people want to find out more about your work, your speaking schedule, the opportunities you have there on Polyface Farms, where should they go?
Our website is Polyface Farms. That's Polyface, Polyface Farms, and everything is on there. It's a very, very eclectic website, and you'll want to park there for a few minutes and just see all the stuff.
Well, we're going to have you back on to talk about more of this stuff, because there's questions about what steps people can take if they want to go do that urban relocation to the rural areas, how they can get started in farming. You've talked to us about some of those ideas in the past. So we just thank you for joining us this time on Liberty and Finance and Reluctant Preppers, and we'll hope to have you back on soon.
Thank you. It's been a delight and an honor. Thank you, Dunnigan.
All right, man. Thank you. I sorry to have to make it such an abrupt ending, but I just appreciate it.
That's all right.
All right.
That's okay.
Okay.
Very well. Thank you.
Take care. I'll send you the link.
Care.
It'll probably be about a week till this goes up and out, because we'll be traveling, but we'll get it up there, and we'll send you a link as soon as it is.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hello, Dan.
Hey, Lee. How you doing, buddy?
Doing okay. Talk about timing. I was just getting off previous... To acquire gold and silver, just go to libertyandfinance.com. When the main site comes up, click on Bullion Sales. That's libertyandfinance.com, Bullion Sales. You'll see my name, Dunnigan Kaiser, my phone number, and my associate, Kaiser Johnson, his phone number, our email, libertyandfinance@protonmail.com.